There is a moment that often goes unnoticed. Someone offers kindness, not dramatic, not excessive, just simple warmth. And instead of feeling comforted, your body reacts first. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts retreat. You respond politely, maybe even kindly, but something inside closes. Later, when you replay the moment, you explain it away. You were tired. You didn't feel like talking. You didn't want to make it awkward. You didn't want to need anything. But the truth is quieter and harder to admit. Receiving care didn't feel safe. There's a specific psychology behind adults who pull away from connection. It isn't a lack of desire. It isn't emotional coldness. And it certainly isn't independence in the way people assume. Most adults who avoid closeness crave it deeply. They imagine it. They long for it. They think about it far more than they let on. But wanting connection and trusting it are not the same thing. At some point in their life, often without realizing it, they learn that closeness came with consequences, that letting someone meant exposure, that being understood also meant being vulnerable to misunderstanding. That care was unpredictable, so they adapted. They built lives that allow partial intimacy. They stay reachable but not available. They show interest without revealing depth. They engage without surrendering emotional ground. They text instead of calling. They listen more than they speak. They share stories without sharing feelings. From the outside, they appear stable, self-sufficient, emotionally regulated, even admirable. But internally, there is a tension they struggle to name, a quiet strain between wanting closeness and fearing what closeness might cost. This pattern is often mistaken for fear of rejection, but it runs deeper than that. The real fear is exposure, because being seen means being known, and being known means losing control over how you are perceived. Adults who avoid connection are often highly aware of themselves. They monitor tone. They edit reactions. They curate which parts of themselves are visible. They don't hide everything. They hide selectively. They show what feels safe. They protect what feels tender. And genuine connection threatens that careful balance. What many people don't realize is that this pattern rarely begins in adulthood. It usually forms early, in subtle moments that seemed insignificant at the time. A child who learned to self-soothe because no one noticed the stress. A teenager who discovered that honesty caused confusion instead of comfort. A sensitive person who felt too intense for others. A quiet one who learned that silence avoided trouble. Over time, the nervous system absorbs these experiences. Closeness becomes something you brace for, not something you relax into. Psychology often explains this through attachment patterns, but labels aren't necessary to understand the experience. The message is the same. Emotional safety was inconsistent. And when safety is inconsistent, distance becomes regulation. Here's the paradox. Adults who avoid connection usually care more, not less. They feel deeply. They notice subtle emotional shifts. They sense tension before it's spoken. They remember details others forget. Because they feel so much, loss feels heavier. Misunderstanding feels sharper. Disappointment feels more destabilizing. So they remain just outside intimacy, close enough to belong, far enough to protect themselves. Yet the longing never disappears. At night, their mind drifts toward imagined understanding. Someone who sees without demanding. Someone who stays without pressure. Someone who doesn't punish retreat. They want closeness without scrutiny. Love without evaluation. Trust without unpredictability. And still, when warmth approaches, the reflex activates. A subtle step back. A change of subject. A gentle emotional withdrawal. This avoidance isn't random. It follows patterns so consistent that many people don't realize they're doing it. Compliments are deflected. Offers of help are declined. Curiosity is met with minimization. It's fine. It's nothing. I've got it. These phrases sound harmless, but they serve a purpose. They prevent dependency. They preserve emotional distance. Many adults who avoid connection believe they're easier to love when they don't need anything, more acceptable when they don't ask, more likable when they remain composed. So they become reliable, capable, polished, and often quietly lonely. Loneliness doesn't always feel like isolation. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion after social interactions. Sometimes it feels like overanalyzing conversations long after they end. Sometimes it feels like pulling away from someone you care about because closeness feels overwhelming. And sometimes it feels like numbness because distance doesn't just mute pain, it mutes joy. Research shows that emotional overstimulation plays a significant role here. Some nervous systems register closeness intensely. Their minds process interactions deeply. Their memories store emotional experiences vividly. For them, intimacy isn't neutral. It's activating. Distance becomes calming. Another factor is self-protection through independence. Many adults learned early that relying on others was unpredictable, so they became self-reliant not as a preference, but as survival. If I don't depend, I can't be disappointed. If I don't express needs, they can't be ignored. Over time, this becomes automatic. There's also the internal narrative. Too much, not enough, too emotional, too complicated, too quiet, too different. This belief quietly shapes behavior. Why reveal something that might confirm your worst fear? So a filtered version is offered instead. Ironically, many of these adults excel in other areas of life. They are disciplined, perceptive, thoughtful. They become the listener who rarely shares, the helper who never asks, the partner who loves deeply but struggles to receive love. What the psychology reveals is something important. Avoiding connection is not avoiding love. It is avoiding vulnerability. Vulnerability is not just disclosure. It is allowing yourself to be affected, allowing someone's presence to matter, allowing uncertainty. For someone who has spent years managing emotions carefully, that feels like stepping into the unknown unprotected. But here is the quiet turning point. Eventually, avoidance becomes heavier than vulnerability. Distance begins to hurt more than closeness. Isolation feels louder than fear. And change begins subtly. You pause instead of retreating. You consider honesty instead of deflection. You notice that distance is no longer protecting you. This isn't a dramatic transformation. It's a gentle recalibration. Healing doesn't mean becoming emotionally open overnight. It starts with allowing small moments of visibility, receiving kindness without shrinking it, asking for help without apology. Because connection isn't built through force. It's built through permission. And adults who avoid connection often have immense capacity for love. Not loud love, deep love. Once they feel safe, they become present, loyal, attuned. But safety begins internally, replacing self-protection with self-trust, trusting that you can handle being known, trusting that authenticity does not make you unlovable. Avoidance was never a flaw. It was an adaptation, and adaptations can evolve. Avoiding connection was never about avoiding people. It was about protecting a self that didn't feel safe to be seen. Healing is not about becoming someone else. It's about creating conditions where the real you no longer needs to hide. And when that happens, connection stops feeling like a risk. It begins to feel like home.